My name is Natalie Hart, and I'm 31 years old. 2 days after my wedding, my honeymoon disappeared. Not we changed our minds disappeared. Not weather delay disappeared. It vanished the way a floor vanishes when you step on a trapdoor. Fast, clean, and with a thud you feel in your chest before you understand what happened. The email arrived at 6:12 a.m. on a Monday. Subject: reservation canceled, payment reversed. I stared at it from my pillow, half awake, expecting a glitch. I refreshed. The message stayed. Another email followed. Then another. Airline resort, excursion company, each one politely confirming the same impossible thing. Our bookings were gone. I had planned this trip for months. Maui, a small oceanfront resort, a sunrise snorkeling tour, one ridiculous couple's massage package my best friend insisted I deserved after wedding planning. Everything purchased on my card, everything confirmed, everything scheduled around my time off. I worked hard for those days. I guarded them like gold. My husband, Luke Moreno, rolled over beside me and blinked at the bright screen. Luke, what's wrong? I couldn't breathe for a second. Then I shoved the phone toward him. Luke read, brow tightening. He sat up, hair sticking up like a startled cat, and scrolled through the cancellations in silence. Luke, this can't be real. It was real. My heart sprinted. My body reacted before my mind did. Heat in my face, nausea in my throat, a cold numbness in my hands. I swung my legs out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and logged into my travel account. The itinerary was blank. Not moved. Not changed. Blank. Luke opened his own email and started searching. Luke, I have cancellations too, but I didn't book anything. I booked everything. I typed payment reversed into the search bar and watched the transaction history load. There it was, a chargeback. Not from me. A chargeback filed on my card, reversing the honeymoon payments as unauthorized. I stared, brain refusing. Unauthorized. Luke stood behind me, both hands on my shoulders, grounding. Luke, call the bank. I did. The fraud department answered after 3 minutes of hold music that felt like a taunt. A calm voice ran through security questions, then paused. Rep. Ms. Hart, the chargeback request came from an authorized user on your account. My stomach dropped. Me. There are no authorized users. Another pause. Typing sounds. Rep. There is one. Added 2 years ago. My vision tunneled. Me. Who? The representative spelled the name slowly, like I might not recognize it. My father. Richard Hart. A man who called me dramatic when I cried at 12. A man who called me independent when I needed help at 24. A man who smiled in wedding photos 2 days ago like he hadn't been quietly reaching into my life for years. Luke's hands tightened on my shoulders as if he could feel my spine trying to fold. Me. That's impossible. Rep. He passed verification. The request was submitted from a device on file. On file? My skin went cold. 2 years ago, I gave my parents access to my account. Not because I wanted to, because I was trained to. Because in the Hart House, being the responsible one meant your boundaries were negotiable and your money was family money. The honeymoon wasn't canceled by bad luck. It was canceled by my family. And the worst part, I had handed them the scissors. If you're still with me, breathe. Because the moment I tell you why my father was an authorized user is the moment the whole story starts to make sense. In the Hart family, love didn't arrive as comfort. It arrived as expectation. My parents weren't cartoon villains. They didn't scream every day. They didn't hit. They didn't abandon me in the obvious ways people understand. They showed up to school plays. They posted photos on holidays. They bought me birthday cakes. But there was a hierarchy. My older brother Mason sat at the top like a permanent trophy. He was 2 years older than me and built for attention. Captain of the soccer team, charming, loud, confident. My parents treated his mistakes like weather. Unfortunate, unavoidable, not his fault. I was the steady one, the planner, the one who got scholarships, remembered deadlines, and didn't cause scenes. When Mason announced he wanted to take time after high school to figure things out, my mother cried happy tears and called it brave. When I announced I wanted to study nursing, my father nodded. Dad, practical, you'll always have work. Practical, stable, useful. Those words followed me into adulthood like they were stitched into my skin. I moved to Seattle for school with grants and loans and a part-time job at a coffee shop. I pulled double shifts and studied in the back room between orders. I graduated and got hired at a hospital. I built a life that looked calm from the outside, because calm was safer than need. Meanwhile, Mason drifted. One job, then another. A business idea. A short-lived e-commerce store. A girlfriend my parents adored. A breakup my parents treated like a national tragedy. And whenever Mason's life wobbled, my parents rotated their entire world around him. Whenever my life wobbled, my parents reminded me I could handle it. Mom, you're strong, Natalie. Dad, you've always been independent. It sounded like praise. It functioned like permission to ignore me. The first time money entered the dynamic, it felt small. I was 27, newly promoted, finally breathing a little. My dad called one evening with a tight voice. Dad, we're in a bind, just for this month. Mortgage payment. A temporary gap. He sounded embarrassed, which made me feel guilty for having questions. I transferred the money. It felt like being a good daughter. Then it happened again. And again. Insurance. Car repairs. Mason needs help with a deposit. Mason's credit got dinged. We need to smooth it. Your mother's medical bill came earlier than expected. Each request arrived with urgency and shame, and those were the keys to my compliance. I didn't think of it as a pattern. It felt like separate emergencies, like raindrops, until you realize the storm never stops. 2 years ago, my mom called with a new angle. Convenience. Mom, sweetheart, we're getting older. What if something happens to you? We should be able to help. Add your father as an authorized user so he can manage emergencies. She framed it like love. She framed it like safety. I was tired. I was working nights. Mason had recently borrowed my parents' car and totaled it. My mother sounded fragile. My father sounded reasonable. My brain wanted the call to end, so I did it. I added my father. One click, one signature, one line of access. I didn't know I was signing up for a lifetime subscription to my own exploitation. I didn't know I'd just put a spare key under the welcome mat. Luke came into my life a year after that. We met at a friend's backyard barbecue, both of us pretending not to care about the cornhole tournament while secretly caring too much. He was warm, steady, and quietly funny. The kind of person who didn't need to be the loudest to be noticed. He worked as a civil engineer and talked about bridges the way I talked about patience. Like the details mattered because people's lives depended on them. Our first date ended with me checking my phone twice because I was used to being needed. Luke noticed. Luke, is someone okay? Me. Yeah, it's just family stuff. He didn't push. He didn't make jokes about drama. He just nodded like family can be heavy without being loud. When he proposed, it was a quiet evening in our apartment, with takeout containers and a movie paused on the screen. Luke, I want a life with you that feels safe. Safe. That word hit my chest like warmth. We planned a small wedding in Washington. String lights, wildflowers, a venue near the water. Nothing extravagant, just enough. My parents had opinions. Mason had demands. Mason wanted to bring a +1 my fiancé hadn't met. Mason wanted a speech slot. Mason wanted me to help with a last-minute suit cost. Mason wanted a travel reimbursement. My parents helped Mason by turning to me. Mom, just this once. Dad, you can handle it. My bank account became the quiet solution to their loud problems. I wanted to believe my family would behave for one weekend. I was wrong. The honeymoon cancellation snapped something in me. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, Luke beside me, and called the travel company first. A cheerful agent explained the cancellations like it was routine. Agent, a chargeback reversed the payments, so the vendors automatically canceled reservations. Me, I didn't file a chargeback. Agent, the bank flagged the payments as disputed. My jaw clenched. Me, can we rebook? Agent, not at the same price. The promotion ended. Some dates are no longer available. My chest tightened with helpless fury. Luke's hand squeezed mine. Next call, the bank again. Me, I want the chargeback reversed. Rep, we can investigate, but the request came from an authorized user. Me, remove him. Rep, we can remove him immediately, but reversing the dispute may take time. Time, the one thing a honeymoon doesn't have. My throat burned. Me, I need the device details. Rep, we can note the IP and device for the claim. Luke's face hardened. Luke, this is sabotage. I nodded because that word fit like truth. We removed my father's access. We froze the account. We opened a new one. We changed passwords. We turned my life into a security project. And still the trip was gone. I stared at the blank itinerary and felt grief as sharp as betrayal. Luke, we can do a staycation. We can go somewhere else. The sweetness of his trying made me cry harder. Because the trip wasn't the only thing stolen. The honeymoon was supposed to be the first quiet chapter of my marriage. No family emergencies, no guilt calls, no fixing other people's mess. Just me and Luke resting. My father had reached into that and erased it. Not by accident, on purpose. Decision settled in me like a new bone. Luke watched my face. Luke, what do you want to do? Me, I want answers. And I want this to stop. My father didn't pick up my call. Neither did my mother. Neither did Mason. So I drove. I drove 3 hours south to Portland, where my parents lived in a neat house with a trimmed lawn and a porch swing that looked like a lifestyle ad. Luke wanted to come. Luke, I'm not letting you face them alone. We arrived at noon. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I sat in the car for a full minute, staring at the front door, remembering childhood. The door opened before I even knocked. My mother stood there with an expression already prepared. Wounded confusion. Mom. Natalie? No hello, no congratulations, no how's married life, just suspicion. I walked past her into the living room. My father stood near the window, arms crossed, trying to look calm. Dad, this is a bit much. A bit much. Me, you canceled my honeymoon. Dad, we didn't cancel anything. Me, the bank traced the dispute to your authorized access. A flicker around his eyes. Dad, you're misunderstanding. Luke stood close, quiet presence. Me, you filed a dispute. You reversed the payments. The resort canceled. The flights canceled. My mother's voice rose, breathy and theatrical. Mom, why would we do that? Think. Me, that's what I'm doing. Dad, it was an accident. Me, no. Dad, Natalie. Me, no. My father flinched at it like he wasn't used to hearing it. Mom, you're stressed. Weddings do that. Luke's body stiffened. Luke, please don't frame her as unstable. My mother turned to him, offended. Mom, excuse me? Luke, this is serious. My father's eyes narrowed. Dad, this is between us. Luke, it's between you and my wife's bank account. My father's face reddened. Dad, fine, you want the truth? He inhaled sharply. Dad, we disputed it because we needed the funds. Me, for what? My mother's shoulders slumped. Mom, Mason, of course. Dad, your brother has a situation, a loan, a mistake. He needed help immediately. Me, so you erased my honeymoon. Mom, don't be dramatic. Dramatic. The family label for not convenient. Me, you reversed our bookings. Dad, we were going to pay it back. Me, with what? Silence. Mom, we're family. Family helps. I stared at them in their tidy living room and realized they didn't even recognize how wrong it was. To them, my honeymoon was a luxury. Mason's crisis was reality, and my role was to fund reality quietly while being praised for being strong. Me. I'm removing more than access. Dad. You already removed it. Me. I'm ending the money pipeline. My father's brow furrowed. Dad. What pipeline? I opened my notes. Years of transfers and confirmations. Me. Mortgage gaps, insurance, repairs, Mason's deposits, medical bills. Mom. You offered. Me. You trained me. Dad. This is gratitude. Me. This is reality. Luke stepped in, calm. Luke. No more disputes, no more access, no more emergency fund. Dad. We sacrificed for you. Me. Grants did, loans did, night shifts did. Mom. We raised you. Me. And I raised Mason's safety net. My father searched for a lever that wasn't working. Dad. You're punishing us. Me. I'm stopping. Mom. What about Mason? Me. Mason is 33. He can solve his situation. Dad. You're heartless. Me. I'm finished. Luke guided me toward the door with one hand on my back. My mother tried to follow with tears and urgency. Mom. We were desperate. Desperate for my money. I turned once at the doorway. Me. You erased my honeymoon to save Mason from discomfort. That tells me exactly where I rank. Then I left. The fallout arrived in waves, voicemails from new numbers, emails that swung between guilt and rage, a cousin warning me that my parents were telling everyone I was not myself, and Luke was isolating me. They tried to protect their image by attacking mine. Luke and I didn't respond. We tried to salvage our trip. Everything was more expensive. Everything was sold out. Every option felt like a penalty for my family's entitlement. Luke. Cabin on the coast? I nodded, swallowing grief, because the point wasn't Hawaii. The point was that my father reached into my marriage like I still belonged to him. I opened my laptop and pulled up my records. Dates, amounts, totals. The number turned my stomach. Luke. That's a life. Me. It's my life. We drafted a boring message with 3 facts and 1 boundary. Sent it to a few relatives who mattered. Attached a screenshot from the bank, identifying the authorized user, then turned off our phones. We went quiet on purpose. For the first time, the quiet belonged to me. 3 weeks later, Luke booked a replacement honeymoon, a small cabin on the Oregon coast. Rain, pine, salt air, a fireplace that popped like tiny fireworks. Not Maui, but ours. That first night, I cried hard, not for the tropics, but for the years of being ranked. Luke held me and waited until my body stopped treating the room like a battlefield. We made practical lists in the morning: accounts, passwords, credit freezes. Luke called it building walls so we can have windows. I wanted windows. Back home, the escalation continued. A vague post from Mason about abandonment. A package from my mother. Wedding photos, and a note calling it a misunderstanding. An unfamiliar inquiry on my credit report. My stomach dropped. We froze everything. We set alerts. We replaced security answers with nonsense words no one could guess. Then I met with a lawyer named Renee who spoke in calm, precise language and kept reminding me that boundaries require enforcement. Certified mail went out, formal notice, calm facts, no more interference. My father responded in all caps and never mentioned the honeymoon chargeback directly. He attacked Luke. He attacked my character. He called it out of proportion. Out of proportion. Luke read it, then looked at me. Luke. He's angry the door is locked. Me. Yes? Luke. Then we keep it locked. Therapy helped. Not instantly, but steadily. It gave names to patterns I had always called normal: golden child, scapegoat, parentification, financial enmeshment. It also gave me permission to feel anger, without turning it into guilt. Then my grandmother called. Her voice was tired and honest. Grandma, Did he really cancel your honeymoon? Me. Yes. Grandma. Why? Me. Mason needed money. Dad had access. Grandma exhaled. Grandma. I suspected the pattern. Grandma. I'm sorry. Grandma. You don't have to fix them. Hearing it from her loosened something in my chest. Months passed. Without my money, my parents learned reality. My father took part-time consulting. My mother started bookkeeping. Mason moved back in with them. Not thriving, surviving. My mother eventually mailed a letter, a direct apology for the chargeback, a confession that they decided the honeymoon charges were available. One sentence tightened my throat. We forgot you are a person, not a backup plan. I didn't rush to forgive. I didn't rush to reconnect. But the letter was the first time her words felt like a door, not a lever. 6 months later, Mason messaged again. Mason, I paid off the loan. Mason, I got a job. Mason, I'm sorry. I kept it short. Me, good. Me, keep going. Mason, do you hate me? Me, I hate what happened. Me, trust takes time. Mason, fair. That single word felt like progress. A year after my wedding, Luke and I returned to Hawaii. Not as replacement, as choice. Different island, quieter resort. No perfect itinerary, just room to breathe. On the first morning, barefoot on the balcony, ocean stretching like a promise, Luke wrapped his arms around me. Luke, this time nobody touches it. Me, this time nobody has the key. The ocean moved, constant and indifferent. And for the first time, peace didn't depend on my family behaving. It depended on my boundaries. If there's one lesson a canceled honeymoon taught me, it's this. When people treat your boundaries as betrayal, it's often because your compliance was their comfort. My parents trained me to believe love meant being useful. My marriage taught me love means being safe. I keep thinking about the exact moment my father decided to do it. Because somewhere between my wedding day and my honeymoon morning, my father sat down with his phone or laptop and chose the word unauthorized to describe my purchase. That word matters. It's not, I'm worried. It's not, can you talk? It's not, we're desperate. It's fraud. To select that reason code, he had to take a breath and lean into the idea that my choices belong to him. He had to view my marriage celebration, my vacation, my rest, as an optional expense that could be reclaimed for the family's real needs. That's what entitlement does. It shrinks your life until it fits inside someone else's priorities. Growing up, I watched my father do the same thing in smaller ways. When Mason got detention for skipping class, my father brought him ice cream and framed it as stress. Dad, school isn't built for boys like you. When I got a B in calculus and cried, my father stared at me like I was malfunctioning. Dad, you'll be fine. Stop overreacting. Mason's pain was always urgent. My pain was always inconvenient. The honeymoon was the grown-up version of that. My father didn't see a married daughter who deserved rest. He saw a stable account that could be rated. The day after I confronted my parents, Luke and I sat on our couch with juniper between us and opened our wedding envelope box. Guests had gifted us cards with money inside, small amounts, meant to help two newlyweds start life. I wanted to feel gratitude. Instead, I felt sick, because money in my family had never been a gift. It was a chain. Luke watched me hesitate. Luke, we can put it in savings. Me, I'm scared of money. Luke's eyebrows lifted gently. Luke, scared? Me, not of having it, of what it makes people do. Luke's hand covered mine. Luke, then we make it ours. We use it for our life, not their emergencies. Our life. The phrase felt unfamiliar and comforting. We deposited the cash and set a rule. No family loans. No, just this once. No access. No authorized users. No password shared. Luke joked about tattooing the rule on our foreheads. I laughed, then cried, because I wanted it to be that easy. Mason's situation lived in my mind like a mosquito bite. I didn't want to know details because details would invite empathy, and empathy had always been the bridge to my compliance. But a part of me needed to understand the scale of the crisis that justified stealing a honeymoon. I reached out to my Aunt Joyce for the outline. She sent a voice note. Joyce: he borrowed money from some private lender, Nat. Joyce: not a bank. Joyce: high interest. Joyce: he missed payments. Joyce: they threatened court. Joyce: your parents panicked. Panicked. My father's favorite excuse for control. Luke listened beside me, jaw tight. Luke: private lender sounds like risk. Me: Mason likes risk. Me: he just hates consequences. Luke nodded. Luke: your parents hate consequences too. Luke: they outsource them to you. I hated how true it was. The travel company final email came a week after the cancellations. Case closed. Chargeback upheld pending investigation. The wording felt like salt in a wound. I stared at it until Luke took my laptop away gently and closed it. Luke: no more reading their language tonight. Me: it feels like losing twice. Luke: we'll fight it where we can. Luke: but we won't let bureaucracy decide your worth. Worth. Another word my family only applied to Mason's feelings. That night, Luke booked the coast cabin and insisted we treat it like a honeymoon, not a consolation. He bought cheap champagne. He printed a fake itinerary titled The Heart Moreno Honeymoon, Unauthorized Joy. I laughed so hard I snorted, and the snort felt like reclaiming my body from stress. Luke's humor didn't erase pain, but it did something I hadn't realized I needed. It reminded me I was allowed to be happy, even while hurt. At the cabin, the rain turned steady, and the ocean looked angry. Luke built a fire, then handed me a mug of cocoa like I was 5. Me: this is very wholesome. Luke: I contain multitudes. We played board games. We took long walks in wet sand. We watched bad TV and ate noodles. We slept late. And in the quiet, my brain started replaying the past with a new lens. Every just this once wasn't random. Every family helps was a key phrase. Every compliment about being strong was camouflage. My role had been engineered. I had been trained to respond to urgency and guilt long before any spreadsheet existed. When we returned to Seattle, I couldn't stop checking my phone. Even though my father's access was removed, I still feared a new trick. Luke noticed. Luke: your body is waiting for impact. Me: yes. Luke: we can build predictability. He suggested a daily ritual: phones off at dinner, walk after dinner, no bank apps after 8 p.m., no family emails at night, no decisions when emotionally flooded. I thought it sounded silly until I realized my whole life had been a series of decisions made while flooded. We tried it. The first night, I reached for my phone anyway, reflexive. Luke touched my wrist gently, not controlling, just reminding. Luke: dinner. I put it down. The urge felt like withdrawal. I hated that. I also loved that Luke noticed without shaming me. My parents tried one more angle: religion. My mother mailed a card with a Bible verse about honoring parents. I stared at it, fury rising. Honor. In my family, honor meant obedience. Luke read the verse and shook his head. Luke: they're weaponizing virtue. Me: they always did. Me: they just used family before. Me: now they're using God. Luke took the card, placed it in a drawer, and closed it like a file. Luke: your boundaries don't need a theologian. I laughed through tears. The part of this story people always want is the public confrontation. They want me to walk into a family gathering with receipts and watch my father crumble. They want a dramatic scene where everyone claps and my parents leave in shame. Real life didn't give me that. Real life gave me quiet, messy shifts. It gave me relatives who stayed silent because they didn't want conflict. It gave me relatives who apologized in private because they didn't want my parents to punish them. It gave me my mother's letter, half apology, half fear. It gave me my father's stubborn refusal to admit wrongdoing, even while evidence existed. It gave me Mason's slow, reluctant movement toward responsibility, only when he had no other options. Real life gave me a husband who stayed steady while my family flailed. The victory wasn't a viral moment. The victory was waking up one morning and realizing my phone hadn't buzzed with an emergency in weeks. The victory was noticing my shoulders weren't always up around my ears. The victory was learning that peace is something you choose, not something you earn. On a random Tuesday, months after the chargeback, I got a letter from the bank. Not my mother, not Mason, the bank. They concluded the dispute was fraudulent. They reversed the chargeback. They restored my account standing. They warned that the authorized user's actions could be reported if repeated. I stared at the letter and felt a rush of relief so strong I had to sit down. It didn't restore the first honeymoon. That time was gone. But it validated reality in official language. It stated, in bureaucratic ink, what my family tried to call drama. Luke came home from work and found me sitting on the floor with the letter in my hand, laughing and crying at the same time. Luke, good news? I held it up. Me. They believed me. Luke sat beside me, pulled me into his arms, and pressed his cheek to my hair. Luke, of course they did. Luke, you're not crazy. Not crazy. The phrase hit deep, because it had always been my fear. Families like mine don't need to call you crazy out loud. They just imply it every time you resist. That night, we ordered pizza and toasted to boring justice. A few weeks later, my father finally sent a message that wasn't all caps. Short, controlled. Dad, we did what we had to do. Dad, we expected you to understand. Dad, you've changed. I stared at it. Changed. As if growing a spine was a personality flaw. I typed one response, equally short, me. I grew up. Then I blocked the email address, not as revenge, as maintenance. I'm still working on forgiveness, not because my parents earned it, because I don't want to carry anger forever. But forgiveness isn't access. It isn't a reopened pipeline. It isn't pretending the sabotage didn't happen. Forgiveness, for me, looks like this. No shared accounts, no authorized users, no last-minute rescues, no guilt-based decisions, no conversations that start with "you're overreacting." Luke calls it clean living. I call it breathing. If you're listening to this because you recognize yourself in it, here's what I want to offer you. Something I wish someone offered me years earlier. If your family calls you selfish the first time you say no, it's possible they didn't love your generosity. They loved your compliance. If your family treats your boundaries like betrayal, it's possible your boundaries are the first honest thing that has happened in that system in a long time. And if you're scared that saying no will ruin everything, consider this. If a relationship only survives when you pay for it, it wasn't a relationship. It was a bill. I paid it for years. My honeymoon taught me to stop. There's another piece of this that took me longer to admit. I didn't just lose a honeymoon. I lost the illusion that my parents respected me as an adult. My father's chargeback wasn't only about Mason's loan, it was a declaration. It declared that my marriage didn't outrank my brother's comfort. It declared that my time off wasn't mine. It declared that my boundaries were optional. And it forced me to face an uncomfortable memory from my late 20s. 2 years ago, in the same month my father got added as an authorized user, my mother visited Seattle. She arrived with a casserole in a foil pan and that soft, concerned voice that made me want to return to being 12 and good. Mom, your father worries about you. I laughed because my father worrying about me was rare enough to be comedy. Mom, he worries that you carry too much. Carrying too much was my whole brand. Mom, let him help. He wants to feel needed. Needed. That word is a trap when you're the responsible child. She sat at my table and pulled out her phone and guided me through the steps, as if it were a favor. Add authorized user. Confirm. Submit. Mom, it's just for emergencies. She held my gaze like she wanted me to believe it. I believed it because I wanted a mother in that moment, not a manager. That's the truth people rarely admit. Sometimes you comply because you're starving for warmth, and compliance is the closest thing you've been offered. After the bank's letter validated the fraud, I went for a walk alone. No Luke, no Juniper, just me and cold Seattle air. I walked past coffee shops and couples and people who looked like their families weren't constantly waiting for them to slip back into an old role. At a crosswalk, I realized my hands weren't shaking. My body had been bracing for retaliation since the morning the honeymoon vanished, bracing for my parents to show up in person, bracing for accusations, bracing for relatives to pressure me to be the bigger person. The bank's validation didn't erase fear, but it did something important. It turned my fear into anger that had a clear target. Not at myself, at the pattern. When you grow up as the stable one, you learn to blame yourself first. You assume any conflict is your fault for wanting something. You assume any boundary is selfish. You assume your needs are optional. I stood on the corner and watched traffic and realized my needs are not optional. That sentence felt like a rebellion. My parents tried one more tactic in the spring, sending a family friend, a woman named Carol who knew me since childhood, dropped by our apartment building by coincidence. She smiled too wide in the lobby. Carol, Natalie, I heard you've been having a hard time. Hard time. Code for your parents are telling stories. I felt my spine stiffen. Me. I'm fine. Carol leaned in, conspiratorial. Carol, your mother is heartbroken. Carol, she doesn't understand why you're punishing them. Punishing. Another word for boundaries. Me. They canceled my honeymoon. Carol blinked. The story she carried clearly didn't include that detail. Carol. Well, I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. I breathed slowly. Me. The bank called it fraud. Carol's smile faltered. Carol, your father would never. Me. He did. Me. And I'm not discussing it with intermediaries. Carol's eyes narrowed just a little. Carol, family is all you have in the end. I felt a strange calm. Me, that's not true. Me, I have my husband. Me, and I have myself. Carol looked offended, like self-reliance was arrogance. Carol, you'll regret this. Me, I already regretted it. Me, for years. Me, I'm done regretting my own boundaries. I walked past her and took the stairs, heart pounding but steady. Up in our apartment, Luke listened to the story and shook his head. Luke, they outsource pressure. Me, they always did. Luke, not anymore. The last scene I want to share isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It was a Wednesday night, almost a year after the canceled honeymoon. Luke was washing dishes. Juniper was sprawled on the rug. I was sitting at the table with my budget open, planning savings and retirement contributions like a real adult who expects her future to belong to her. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Mom, can we talk sometime? Mom, no money, just talk. I stared at the screen. A year ago, I would have jumped, eager, desperate to prove I wasn't the villain. Now I felt something different. Caution. Luke looked over. Luke, do you want to? I thought for a long moment. Me. Maybe. Me. But not on their timeline. Me. And not without boundaries. Luke nodded. Luke. What boundary? I inhaled. Me. No rewriting. Me. No calling me dramatic. Me. No blaming you. Me. No talking about Mason like he's a toddler. Me. And if anyone mentions money, the conversation ends. Luke smiled, small and proud. Luke. That's clear. Clear. Clarity. The weapon my family never prepared for, because clarity doesn't bend to guilt. I typed one response to my mother. Me. We can talk next month. Me. With clear boundaries. Me. No rewriting the honeymoon sabotage. No blaming Luke. No money conversations. I hit send. Then I waited, expecting the old guilt to flood me. It didn't. Not immediately. Not violently. It arrived like a small wave. then retreated, because my body was learning. Boundaries don't feel natural when you've been trained to survive without them. They feel like learning a new language. But once you learn, you realize something astonishing. You can be kind and firm at the same time. You can love people and still lock the door. You can forgive and still keep the key. And you can build a marriage that begins with safety instead of sacrifice. My honeymoon was canceled, but my life wasn't. It finally started. One last detail because it matters. When Luke and I finally sat on that beach in Hawaii on our second trip, I realized the honeymoon wasn't the only first my father tried to take. He tried to take my first season of marriage, those fragile weeks when you learn each other's routines and trust, when you build your private jokes and your quiet mornings, when you stop being two separate lives and become one shared home. He tried to pull me back into the role of fixer before I had even unpacked my wedding dress. But Luke never let my family turn our marriage into a battlefield. And I never let my family turn my boundaries into shame again. That's the real ending, not the trip, the spine.